at this. Okay, so in this case, given that y is equals to square root of 64 over 3x plus 1, we want to find the calculate certain values of y. So so the first step is to find the value of y when x is equals to 1. It's fairly simple. The first step is to substitute. So y is equals to the square root of 64 divided by 3x, so it's 3 times 1 plus 1. So this is equals to the square root, okay, of 64 divided by 4, which in fact gives you square root 16, and this gives you 4. Okay, now one thing to take note here, if the question writes the square root sign, so if the question in this case writes the square root sign here, okay, if the question already explicitly states the square root sign, when there is a square root sign, this in fact already implies the positive value of the square root. So that's why in this case I'm not going to consider the negative value, because the question has already written there that they only want the positive value of the square root. Okay, it is a convention in mathematics that when you just write y is equals to square root of x, we simply just mean the positive answer of the square root. Okay, if the question states that they want the negative, they will write it as negative square root x. Okay, just something to take note here. And it's pretty important because you're gonna carry these through all the way until you're in until you're older. Okay, so part 2 right here is to find the value of x when y equals to 2. Okay, of course you can just sub your value of y in here and find your answer, and just manipulate, but I always like to challenge myself and manipulate this entire thing. Okay, and what I'm gonna do here is, because there's a square root, I'll remove the square root by squaring both sides, and this will be 64 divided by, okay, why is my thing always on here? Okay, 3x plus 1. How to make x the subject? Simply so we have y squared times 3x plus 1 equals 64. I'm not going to expand it out because there is no point to expand it out. Actually, what I'm going to do is, bring the y squared over. So 3x plus 1 is simply equals to 64 divided by y squared. Okay, and then 3x is then equals to 64 divided by y squared minus 1. Okay, and last but not least, we have that divide by 3 thing. So x will be this entire thing divided by 3. But what you can write is, actually you can just write it as 1/3 times 64 over y squared minus 1. Correct? Because you're taking the entire thing divided by 3. In fact, you're just taking 1/3 times it. And let's sub in the value of y. So y is equals to 2. So 64 divided by 2 square minus 1 is in fact equals to 1/3 times 16 minus 1, which is in fact equals to 5. Okay? So that's it for part A. Now part B is to explain if it is possible to have a value of y if x is less than or equal to 1/3. Okay, so we're gonna find a value of y if x is less than or equal to 1/3. Now one thing that you must know is that since there is a square, okay, let's look at the formula again. Okay, the formula is y equals to square root 64 divided by 3x plus 1. Okay, maybe this is very ugly, so let me just delete it. And sorry, that's not going to be good. Just delete this, and let's just copy what I written here earlier and duplicate it, and I'm going to shift it here. Okay, now there are two things here. Number one, the fraction is under the square root. Okay, so for the fraction to be under the square root, anything that is inside the square root has to be positive, right? So what do I mean by that? Can you possibly square root a negative answer? You cannot, right? this is not possible. Okay, so if you want to square root 64 over 3x plus 1, this actually means that 64 over 3x plus 1 must be more than or equals to 0. Okay, I say again, you cannot square root a negative, you only can square root a positive answer. So what does it mean is that this fraction 64 divided by 3x plus 1 has to be more than or equals to 0. Okay, so I can actually write, since y is equal to that, then 64 over the must be more than or equals to 0. Now 64 is already positive, so this would also mean, to make this 64 over 3x plus 1 positive, 3x plus 1 must also be more than or equals to 0. Okay, so 3x plus 1 cannot be negative. Okay, I say again, 3x plus 1 cannot be negative here because it does not make sense. If 3x plus 1 is negative, then 64 over 3x plus 1 would be negative, and that is not correct, because in the question we have stated that y is equals to the square root of 64 over 3x plus 1. So 3x plus 1, 64 over 3x plus 1 has to be positive, and then 3x plus 1 has to be positive. Now this is an inequality, so let's make x the subject here. So we have 3x will be more than or equals to negative 1. And then x will be more than or equals to negative 1 over 3. So what does this actually mean? This actually means for y to have a value, okay, so for y to have a value here, okay, y must be positive. Y in this case is formed by square root over 64 over 3x plus 1. Okay, 64 over 3x plus 1 must be positive, which also means 3x plus 1 has to be positive, and when we form that, x has to be more than or equals to negative 1 over 3. Now the question says if it's possible to have a value of y if x is less than or equal to 1 over 3. Is this possible? Based on what we found here, this is not possible, right? X has to be more than negative 1 over 3. But the question is asking, can there be a value if x is less than or equal to 1 over 3? The answer is no, because what are some values that are less than 1 over 3? They can be negative 2. Negative 2, if x equals to negative 2, then that contradicts this entire thing, correct? If x cannot be lesser than negative 1 over 3, hence we can say that therefore it is not possible for y to have a value if x is less than or 1 over 3, because x must be more than equal to negative 1 over 3. That's all. Okay, this is more abstract. You need to kind of understand the make sense of the fraction and the meaning of square root. Okay, I say again, you have to make sense of the square root and the fraction here. Okay, so that will be all for this last word example. Thank you very much.